What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and a little while ago the Godly Noob shared a few off-looking clips on Twitter where he and other players were losing gunfights in Rainbow Six Siege after jumping down from height. Here's his original clip of a jump out from the second floor of theme park.
This game's shit, dude. Holy shit, this game is bad, dude.
It looks like a lot of his shots on the way down should have hit, but the buck was barely injured. Something doesn't feel quite right here. This follow-up retweet is even better. Achieved, Rainbow Six Pro player and current team captain for TSM, shared this rather amusing clip.
On yellow.
What the fuck is that? The fuck is this game, dude?
Not one, but two shotgun blasts at very close range and not a scratch on Ash. Nothing, not a single hair out of place. Two cases with similar problems, one after the other. This cannot be a coincidence, right? Is there something fundamentally broken with vaulting or falling in Rainbow Six Siege? Time to investigate. Now, as you may have seen from the timestamps on the tweets, it has taken me a little while to dig through this matter. I basically approached the topic in 3 stages. Firstly, I tested if vaulting and falling somehow affects a character's hitbox at all. Could the hitbox be detaching from the character model in some way that could influence gunfights? Is it possible that the hitbox lands on the ground earlier or even immediately after vaulting and starts tanking shots while you're still mid-air? Next, I tested if the first-person view and third-person character model of a player can somehow become desynced while vaulting at height. And finally, I ran some tests to see if there's any issues with a player's shots being able to register while they're vaulting or falling, because both of the examples from Twitter seem to indicate that there could be an issue with hit registration of the shots fired by the vaulting player. So let's go through the results of these tests one by one, and as always, timestamps to the different sections of the video are available in the description and pinned comment below. This video is brought to you by NordVPN, the world's #1 rated virtual private network provider, which you can find at nordvpn.com/rogue9. Do you like playing video games or watching streamed video? Of course you do, but maybe you're not getting the most out of these activities because you're not using a VPN. Even in these modern times we live in, some games have region-based censorship or region-locked online matchmaking, and pretty much every streaming service like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, or Amazon Prime will have regional content restrictions, potentially denying you access to some great shows. If you feel oppressed by these first world problems, then a VPN is exactly what you need. And if you're going to get a VPN, then why not go directly to NordVPN, the best choice there is as rated by VPN Mentor and PC Mag. If you use my link in the description below or use the code ROGUE9 at checkout, you can get up to 70% off plus 1 month free access, and you can even trial the service for absolutely free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Who could say no to a free trial? No one can. So click the link below to support the channel and to get more info about NordVPN. Testing hitboxes is something I became quite familiar with in the preparation for my recent video about the elite skins in Rainbow Six, where I spent a truly unhealthy amount of time inspecting and touching the in-game character models to make sure the elite outfits do not affect the hitboxes. The best way to visually check hitboxes is to use either Monty or Clash with extended shield and then check when the hipfire dot turns green. I ran several tests of operators jumping out of windows, both testing whether the hitbox and character models arrive at the bottom at the same time, as well as tracking them on the way down, and with both tests, the results came up negative for issues. The hitbox and character model stay perfectly in sync. But those tests were run on local matches, so just to be extra sure, I also ran some tests in online custom games with pings of either around 75 milliseconds or just over 100 milliseconds, and I also changed the test up a bit to use live fire instead of the hipfire indicator. I let the vaulting player drop into a stream of bullets and checked when you can see those shots register, and again, in every test the hits registered correctly with no issues. Let me show you the Valkyrie example frame by frame. Every bullet mark on the wall shows up at exactly when the bullet counter goes down because those decals are rendered locally. This is when the first shot on Valk hits, and this is when the second shot lands, but because both players are on a moderately high ping of just over 100 milliseconds, the blood splatters that prove that these shots registered as hits on the server are 7 frames or 116 milliseconds delayed. The third and final hit lands here, and the confirmation of the kill is received 8 frames later in this case. Good night, Valkyrie, rest well, my sweet, beefy-armed princess. But there it is. Some people will sometimes watch back frame-by-frame recordings of a kill and forget to account for the ping, even though the crosshairs are far away from Valk when the kill is finally registered on the shooter's screen, and that might look fishy at first glance. The ping of over 100 milliseconds for each player perfectly explains the delay in the server-side validation of the hit, and the fact is that everything is perfectly above board with this test and all the others I ran. Conclusion number 1 is that there are no issues with the hitboxes of vaulting players. All of my tests returned results that show that from the shooter's perspective, the hitbox and character model of the vaulter remain in sync. Next, we need to answer the question of whether or not the first and third person fall speed are the same. Is it possible that the vaulting player could somehow be arriving at the bottom quicker or slower on their own screen than they are on other players' screens? To test this, I simply jumped out of Windows again and again while recording the first person and third person view, and oh my god, what was that? Go back a bit, isolate the third person view, and now zoom in and enhance. Play that back for me. Ugh, why? Why is that a thing? How can I unsee that? Ugh. Let's just move on. I ran the first few tests on a local server to eliminate ping as a variable, and check this out. The 2 clips are synchronized by the match timer. At 8 minutes and 30 seconds remaining time, Alibi vaults, and 1 frame later Capitao can see the vault begin on his screen. This minimal delay occurred quite frequently in my tests and makes sense to me even for a local match with almost no ping, because of course the movement info still needs to be sent from one PC to the other, then processed and then replicated. And in addition to this, both recordings are working at 60 FPS, which can cause actions in the game to fall on different frames for each recording, and this can also result in minor differences. In cases like this, to account for the 1 frame delay, we will start the left-hand timer 1 frame later. Now, as we step through the 2 clips though, you can see that the first-person view lands at 1.616 seconds, and at this point, the third-person view is still more than a meter off the ground. From here, it takes another 5 frames for Alibi's character model to finally hit the floor, and even if we deduct that 1 frame initial delay, it still means that we end up with a desync of 4 frames, and that is in a local match with both players on an indicated ping of 1 millisecond. Ha! So there is definitely a problem in terms of keeping jump outs synchronized for all players. But now I have more questions. Is this effect consistent, as in, will the first-person view always fall faster than the character model, and is the amount of desync always the same? Could operator armor type and speed have an effect on falling speed and desync? What about ping? Could it make things even worse? Is it just Windows that cause this issue, or vaulting in general? And could running into the vault result in a different effect compared to vaulting from stationary? In order to answer all of these questions, I ran this type of test again and again and again, and then a few more times, and the results were in equal measure confusing and worrying. Here is an online test with a latency of around 70 milliseconds each and using a rather more hefty operator for the jump out. The third person vault animation starts 6 frames after the first person due to the ping, but the landing is a full 13 frames later, and look at this! The desync caused by the vault appears to cause lingering issues for about a second after landing because Gridlock's turn to the right remains a bit delayed until here, where the third-person model suddenly snaps into place and resynchronizes with the first-person view and the natural delay caused by the moderate pings. In this test with Alibi, the two clips are synchronized by the in-game timer, and that means that the third-person view of the vault is delayed by 8 frames due to the ping. What I am expecting to see here nonetheless is that the first-person view touches down after a shorter flight time than the third-person view, but lo and behold, it's the other way around. Here are the same clips, but synchronized so that the vault animation starts at the same time, so basically taking the ping delay out, and you can clearly see the third-person view touching down 3 frames earlier. This effect can be even more extreme. Here is another set of clips from a local test, and this time it's Ash jumping out. After 1.666 seconds, her character model touches down, and 2 frames later the first-person view receives damage, but at this stage the player is still mid-air on his screen, and it takes another 7 frames before finally touching down at 1.833 seconds. This kind of thing could perfectly explain the frustrating Twitter clips we saw right at the beginning. If it can take up to 167 milliseconds, or maybe even more in some cases, for the first-person view to reach the bottom after the character model is already down for other players on the server, then the vaulting player would be a really easy target during this time. Okay, so sometimes the first-person view falls faster and sometimes it's the third person that gets down sooner, and the fun part about this is that it seems to be completely at random. These tests here were all conducted during the same match. First, Gridlock jumps off the balcony 3 times, and during all 3 jumps, the synchronization is pretty much perfect, but when it's Ash's turn to jump, her first jump results in the third-person view getting down sooner, the second jump is well synchronized, and then the third time, it's the first-person view that hits the ground first. As we've already established, the desync can happen with low ping or high ping, so it doesn't seem to be a causal factor, but it is worth noting that the latency you experience in-game can interact with the effect. Here is an example of Mirror vaulting with moderate ping, and even though the first-person view only falls 83 milliseconds faster than the third-person view, the ping means that the first-person view has a 150 millisecond head start, and so the first-person view touches down almost a quarter of a second earlier when both clips are synchronized with the in-game clock. Only one trial later, the tables are turned and the third-person fall time is shorter, which then ends up counteracting the latency-related delay. So sometimes the combination of ping and desync will make things worse, and sometimes they will partially cancel each other out. So, there appears to be no rhyme or reason to this phenomenon. Sometimes one view is quicker, sometimes the other, sometimes they're synchronized. Armor types play no role, ping can add or subtract from the effect, but otherwise doesn't seem to be connected. The effect is not exclusive to Windows, any vault on any map will do, and it can occur whether you're running into the vault or vaulting from stationary. But how does this happen? What could be causing the fall speeds to be so random? Let's compare 2 different vaults from the same perspective. I've picked 2 separate jumps where the first and third person perspective actually matched up, and here is the first person perspective of Gridlock jumping out of the same window on 2 different occasions. As you can see, up until here, everything looks pretty much synced up, but then the left-hand side seems to accelerate much more quickly and the player hits the ground at 1.666 seconds. While the right-hand side doesn't land until 1.833 seconds. Now comparing from the third-person view, I've mirrored the clips to be hopefully less confusing, and you can see that up to 1.033 seconds, both animations are pretty much in sync. After this point, both animations show the character straightening out, but while the right one straightens out while falling immediately, the left-hand one stays floating in front of the window for another 150 odd milliseconds, which is only 1 frame less than the total difference of 167 milliseconds. So what we can say for sure is that the difference in the time at which a body starts to drop is causing inconsistency in the overall fall time, and that could be the reason for why we see desynchronization between the first and third person fall times. Interestingly, this even goes as far as to affect the detection timer for defenders when jumping out of a window. Check out these clips from different jump outs that are synchronized so that the vault starts at exactly the same time. For Rook, jumping out on the right, the detection countdown starts as soon as his big toe crosses the windowsill while he's still up in the air, and at the same time Alibi, over on the left, doesn't get a countdown until she's almost on the ground already. If we let both of the clips move on from here, you can see that Rook, for whatever reason, ends up getting detected almost a full second earlier than Alibi for jumping out of a window of exactly the same height on the same map. All I can say to that is,
What the fuck is that?
for a timer that only lasts 2 seconds, having almost a full second bonus randomly added on has the potential of significantly affecting the outcome of a jump out. Last but not least, before we move on to investigate the hit registration during vaults, I also want to show off a 3-way comparison I ran. In this set of clips, you can see how the vaulter and 2 different opponents all see significantly different landing times for the same jump. What this clearly demonstrates is that each and every player in a match can potentially have a different experience of the same jump in terms of when the vaulting player lands. Not really surprising, but definitely good to know. And now over to our final set of tests. Is it possible that hit registration is somehow affected for the vaulting player because both of the Twitter clips kind of suggest that enough shots should have been landed to win the fight for the ambushing player? This was a bit challenging to test because the only thing I could think of to try this out was to jump out and shoot at another player while they try to shoot back and then check the footage frame by frame for hits and misses. This is a bit crude as scientific methods go, but if you run enough trials, then hopefully you'll get something useful out of it. Here's the side-by-side view of a decent clip where the lower player wins with a lucky snap, and here is more of a case of the vaulter just getting spotted early and being taken out in the air. Sometimes the vaulter won, sometimes he lost, sometimes the desync worked in one way and sometimes in another. But one thing that was consistent in every clip I checked was that all shots from both players registered absolutely correctly. If the reticle was over the enemy player at the time of the bullet counter going down, the shot always counted as landed, so the conclusion is that through all of my trials I was not able to confirm any issues with bullets landing during the vault. The only possibility I see to explain the Twitter videos from earlier is that the very real desync in first person and third person position could make the vaulter easier to spot and shoot, and that as some of his or her shots are still being fired for a few frames, the servers actually already validated their death, and these additional hits are subsequently discarded. So there it is. The hitbox of both players seems to remain completely intact while vaulting, but there is a definite issue with random amounts of desync that can occur when jumping from height, and that can either give the vaulting player a bit of an advantage or disadvantage in terms of being able to win a gunfight. In addition to that, the detection timer can also be massively affected by the vault animation and can in some cases start up to a full second late, which again can potentially affect the outcome of a subsequent engagement. The desync I was able to record was usually around 3 to 5 frames at 60 FPS, but sometimes going up to as high as 10 frames. It's essentially the blink of an eye, and almost all of the time you would never even notice it if it happened to you in a match. But I do also believe that this potential desync is large enough to have an effect on split-second gunfights, and it could explain the clips that people have been sharing on Twitter. Have you had any issues with jump outs or vaults in Rainbow Six Siege? Share your stories in the comments section below, and with that, as always, many thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.